Hello and welcome back to SnowRunner, y'all, and in this video, we're going to be talking about expeditions. Now, it's been a little while since we've talked about expeditions, and I'm aware of that, and it's actually probably been a little bit longer than it should have been since I last talked about expeditions, but we've actually got some interesting stuff to talk about, even though expeditions hasn't really had any major news developments lately. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't some interesting things to talk about. And what I want to start with is the fact that Expeditions is actually currently the 152nd, as I record this anyway, the 152nd most wish-listed game on Steam. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, 152nd, that doesn't matter. Why are you even talking about it if it's the 152nd game? But here's the thing. When we look at the list on Steam charts and we look at kind of what's sitting around it and some of the other games that it's sort of coexisting with in the list, it starts to become a lot more interesting. Especially when you realize it ranks above giants such as Crime Scene Cleaning Simulator. But no, like in all seriousness, it actually ranks above some really interesting games. And some of them I'm not going to even talk about on here because they are, let's say, a little bit outside the range of what I can talk about on this channel. Although, when I was digging through the Steam charts page, I did find some really interesting files, like, for example, this, which is pretty much the raw, high-quality background file for a lot of the background images that you see of Expeditions, especially with, like, the Expeditions logo kind of plastered right there on the front. But it was interesting to kind of find this high-quality image because, yes, I know it's very heavily rendered and very heavily, like, mixed together, and you've got the desert environment, and you've got the river and mountain environment on the right, but if you look really closely at it, the stuff on the right kind of just looks like SnowRunner assets. It looks like SnowRunner trees, it looks like SnowRunner water, it looks like SnowRunner, even SnowRunner plane wreckage. So while that desert environment is definitely going to be brand new, I am not so sure that the other environment looks as brand new as we thought it was. It kind of just looks like a SnowRunner map that they were like, we're going to pick it up from here and we're going to put it over here and then we're going to say open for business. But you know what I mean? It kind of feels that way. Another extremely interesting bit of Expeditions news comes from an article that was posted, oddly enough, on the video game subsection of the Sports Illustrated website. And I'll link the entire article in the description box down below. But the part that I was especially, I wouldn't say necessarily concerned about, but the part that had me very interested was where they specifically said, and I'm actually directly reading from it here, they specifically said, going forward, Embracer Group confirmed the following releases for the rest of the ongoing financial year, which ends on March 31st, 2024. Homeworld 3, South Park Snow Day, Arizona Sunshine 2, Expeditions, a MudRunner game, Alone in the Dark, Outcast, A New Beginning, Lightyear Frontier, and Deep Rock Galactic Survivors. Now, obviously, we're really only interested in Expeditions on that list. I mean, y'all may be interested in some of the others, but our primary interest here is obviously Expeditions, a MudRunner game. And if you look on Steam, the Steam release date still just says 2024, but it could actually, if this is to be believed, which this is not necessarily any full confirmation or anything, but if the article in question is to be believed, we could actually be seeing Expeditions a lot sooner than we may have expected. But of course, remember to take all of that with a grain of salt because that's really all we can take it with right now. There's not much super concrete here. It's just kind of speculation until we hear something really properly definitive from the devs in like a trailer or a big announcement or something like that. So how are y'all feeling about Expeditions at this point? Has the hype died for you? Is it not interesting anymore? Or is it still an experience that you think you're going to be really interested in moving forward into the new year? Now, one thing, at least for me, that I find super interesting about any time I see discussions related to Expeditions, I seem to always see these polar opposites, right? I seem to see people that are super excited about it and they love the gameplay formula of these games and they just want more of it. Or I see people that are basically like, what is this? We just want more, we want another OG MudRunner. We don't want expeditions. We don't want like reused SnowRunner assets. We don't want this. We don't want that. So maybe kind of a little bit of positive, a little bit of negative, and a little bit of like in the middle indifferent. So I would love to know where y'all individually stand on the release of Expeditions itself. And I know that a lot of y'all have shared your feelings and impressions about Expeditions in my comments already. And I've seen a lot of people, especially in the sort of long-term runner series player community, not necessarily seeming to have the best impressions of Expeditions. And I think Expeditions isn't necessarily built as much for the hardcore player as it is for someone that just kind of enjoys the standard gameplay loop that they've come to know and love in the runner series. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But at the same time, I can totally see where someone would be coming from when they look at, say, for example, Expeditions, and they go, why wasn't this a SnowRunner DLC or an add-on pack or just something like that, rather than a whole new game release? Because a whole new game release it's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of this, it's a lot of that, it's a lot of like, okay, I have to go out and buy a whole new thing now and this, that, and the other. So it can be, I think, a little bit logistically frustrating for some people too. And honestly, as someone that has been with this series as long as I have, I can kind of see where all of the different sides of this are kind of coming from. But on the other hand, I don't necessarily think, I don't know, I think people may, obviously have these ideas of what this series quote unquote once was, or maybe they want to see the series return to a very, I don't know, like a very bare bones aspect like it was in, say, the Spin Tires days or the MudRunner days. And you might say, well, wait a minute, those weren't bare bones. And in terms of features, they kind of were. And I can already hear the people getting super upset about like me referencing MudRunner as quote unquote bare bones, because this is going to be really hard to articulate, but bear with me here. MudRunner was not a bare bones experience, but the game's accessibility to a wider audience was a little bare bones. And I'll get into what I mean by that in a second. What I mean by that is there were a lot of aspects of MudRunner that were not accessible to the general player base, especially when there were so many people on consoles that would watch, say, for example, modded videos of, MudRunner and couldn't necessarily experience that because they played the game on a console. And I know that there's a lot of people that they're old fans of the series, and they will say, well, the console mod aspect of SnowRunner ruined this and ruined that and ruined the game and blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, it brought so many new players to the game that it's only made this series bigger. And I know that there's some people out there that are going to say, well, the series getting bigger and getting more popular made the game worse and this, that, and the other because they're catering to a more casual audience and blah, blah, blah. But even then, I still don't think that MudRunner was, because a lot of people talk about the original MudRunner like it was this ultra hardcore simulation. And I mean, sure, the physics were a little bit more in-depth and hardcore than they are in SnowRunner, but it wasn't necessarily this over-the-top, like ultra-realistic, hyper simulation. Because don't get me wrong, you could still, like in MudRunner, for example, you could still do some pretty wacky things. Now, obviously, do I think the physics in MudRunner were better than the physics are in SnowRunner? Yes, 100%. I believe the MudRunner physics were way better in terms of gameplay and interaction with the ground and the rocks and the mud and this, that, and the other. If we could have the MudRunner physics back, I would take them back in a heartbeat. I would absolutely take them back in a heartbeat because those are the physics that I love. Those are the physics that I honestly prefer. Now, that doesn't mean I hate the SnowRunner physics. I mean, hate is a very strong word, but I don't even dislike the SnowRunner physics. I think they're fine for what they are. I mean, if you've played the series for a long time, you'll obviously know and understand that the physics in SnowRunner are a bit dialed back in terms of like comparison to OG Spin Tires and then, of course, the original MudRunner. But I don't think they're dialed back so far that it quote unquote ruins the experience, as I've heard some players gripe about. And I think the reason why they gripe about it is because more than anything, I think they just want something to gripe about, because people are always going to want something to gripe about. And it kind of is what it is. It's like if there isn't one thing that they're going to gripe about, they're going to gripe about something else. And I think that that's more true in video games than in a lot of other things. Well, it's true in every category of every niche of every fan base of every thing or series that exists. I mean, you're going to find that all the way from Spin Tires and MudRunner to, I don't know, Star Trek. Like, you're literally going to find the same kind of attitude to certain parts of a series in every fan base, and that's just kind of, you're not going to escape it. You're not going to get away from it. So I don't know. I definitely think that there's a lot of people that came from that MudRunner era that have since moved on to obviously BeamNG. But I think there's a lot of people that got introduced to the series in SnowRunner that aren't necessarily interested in a simulator that's as hardcore as BeamNG is. So it's going to be interesting to see where Expeditions kind of fits into that whole in-between realm. But with all of that out of the way, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I will see y'all next time. Talk to y'all later.